Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about calibrating your drone reeds, and this is part of setting your bagpipe up. And this is extremely important because if your reeds aren't calibrated, then your pipes aren't going to be air efficient and they're not going to sound very good. And if they're not air efficient, you're going to be blowing a lot harder. You're going to have kind of leaks where you didn't know there were leaks, and it's just going to make them a lot harder to play. So we'll start by talking about the different parts of a reed, and we have a few different reeds. We've got some of the canards, I've got some canning reeds, and we've got some easy drones over here. Then the parts are all pretty much the same. So we'll just make sure that we have the correct terminology that we're using to discuss this. So this part is the main body of the reed. The tenon is where it inserts into the drone stock, and it's going to have either hemp or rubber sleeve around it. The tongue seat, and that's the band that actually holds the tongue blade in, which is right here. This is the bridle, and this is adjustable and it anchors the tongue blade down. And the tuning screw has a different look depending on the type of reed you're using. These canards use a removable nose cone with a set screw down inside that you manipulate with an Allen key. Some of the other style drones just have a screw on the outside that you can turn in and out. So one of the first things you're going to do with, and this is whether you're a new piper putting in new drone reeds, or if you've just got a new set of reeds, you're going to have to do this every time. So take your reed, opposite end of where it plugs into the pipes, you're going to put your mouth on it and blow. And you should be able to blow past the actual sounding point until it stops. It shouldn't be too hard to do. And that just means that it's got a good sound. It's also a good idea to check for air tightness, which as you're sounding it, cap the end, and it shouldn't leak any air past there. So that didn't leak any air. That one might be leaking a little bit of air, so it could use some adjustment. Okay, step number 2 is going to be, of course, just inserting them into your drones. Now, one idea that's really helpful that you can do is you can actually tap these things out. If you don't know what you're doing, you can call Jeremy or call someone that knows what they're doing and they can do it for you. And basically it ends up threaded like a screw. So this has an internal thread screw, and then it cuts its own threads into the hemp, so to speak. And you can just thread those in there. They're a lot less likely to fall out.
And if anybody ever wonders, ask Sean Lamb why you want to have these threaded in.
Okay, so now we're going to get into kind of the real meat and potatoes of these things. Step number 1 is always going to be to set the blowing pressure on these things, and that's generally done with bridle movement. So we've put in a couple of reeds right now. One is the correct adjustment and one is not the correct adjustment, and we'll see if you can tell which is which. Taking a little too much air. Okay, so you're going to want about that much blowing pressure. It's kind of hard to describe how much it is, but you'll feel it. You should be able to shut it off without turning red or veins popping out of your forehead.
Yes.
So step number 1 is setting that pressure correctly, and you're going to want to do that for all of your drones, both your tenors and your bass. Your tenor should shut off at the same time, and we'll look at that again in a minute, and the bass should shut off slightly afterwards. Okay, so on the reeds we have in Scott's pipe, you can see they're taking far too much air. So what we're going to do is scoot the bridle downward slightly so that they shut off a little bit sooner.
Now, how the bridle adjustment works is as you bring the bridle down away from the reed seat, it's going to sort of clamp down lower on the tongue and not allow it to vibrate as easily. Conversely, moving the bridle up is going to free up more of the tongue to vibrate. So if it's shutting off too soon, you want to move it up so it can vibrate more freely. It'll take more air. If you can't get it to shut off, move it away from the reed seat, clamping it down on the tongue, making it more air efficient.
Okay, yeah, that's too much. Be careful when you're moving the bridle, especially with the synthetic reeds. The rule of thumb is if you can see how much you move the bridle, you moved it too much. So it's going to be just the tiniest little amount. You're going to put a little pressure on the bridle and then test it again. It seems a little bit better.
Yep, that was better.
Okay, now just to get a basic starting point for the efficiency where we set the bridle, Go ahead and play the pipes, make the chanter sound. Just make sure that these aren't cutting off before the chanter. So blow it up, and then you're gonna make the sound of the chanter, and then you're gonna increase your blowing pressure. You're gonna overblow the chanter, apparently, and you're gonna see where these things shut off. Okay, so you can hear the chanter sounded. You could hear him overblow and become sharp. We heard one tenor shut off, then the other tenor shut off, and then the bass, never shut off.
Never shut off.
Never shut off. So what that means is we got to adjust these so that they're equal, and then this is still taking too much air. So it's going to be harder for you to blow, so we can adjust that a little bit more. Okay, so we do know that these are about correct, so we can actually forego the chanter now. Go ahead and pop the chanter out. That'll just make things easier. So this guy's shutting off first. It sounds like it's about where we want it to shut off, which was just a little stronger than the chanter. You had to overblow. This one took a bit more. So that means that we're going to lower the bridle on this one just a hair more to try and match this one. So we're going to forget about the bass for a minute. We're going to try and get these two to cut off at exactly the same time. Yeah, this one's just still slightly lagging.
Slightly lagging.
Yeah,
Touch more. Just a titch.
Barely even notice. Just tap it in now.
Tap it.
And as you're adjusting the bridle, make sure that you're keeping the thing completely level. So if you're moving it down, don't kind of move it down at angles front and back. You want it completely flat all the way across.
What am I trying to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
All right.
you got it.
Okay.
Okay.
So now.
Those shut off at exactly the same time, so those are where we want them. So now we're going to do the bass. When you adjust the bass drone, you want that to cut off as well, but you want it to cut off slightly after the tenors. So the tenors will cut off, a little bit more pressure, and the bass will cut off. Another benefit of doing this, besides just making your bag more air efficient and easier to play, it's actually going to sound better because this will also kind of adjust the tone a little bit. But the other thing you can do is it will get the reeds to the point where you can shut them off with a sudden pressure spike. So if your drones are just sounding horrible for whatever reason, you can actually bump your arm in really sharply and just cut the drones altogether and keep playing the sound. That sounded pretty good. So this is something that you're going to have to kind of do over and over again just to make sure. It does take a while, but it's well worth it.
So something else to note, moving the bridle up towards the seat is going to cause the reed to be less air efficient. It's also going to make it louder and give it kind of a harsher, bolder sound. It'll also flatten the pitch slightly. On the other hand, moving the bridle down away from the seat will make it more air efficient, but will also make the reed quieter, give it a smoother sound, and will sharpen the pitch a little bit.
Okay, so step number 2, now that we've gotten these adjusted to where we like the blowing pressure, is we're actually going to tune the reeds so that these are sitting in their optimal position on the tuning pins. An optimal position is you want a little bit of hemp showing on both your tenors. Your bass drone, you should have a little bit of hemp showing at the top, right at the hemp line, and then you're going to have like 1.5 to 2 inches on this lower tuning pin. It'll be completely covering the hemp line. Now remember, with any musical instrument or any kind of sound device that travels through a tube, the longer it is, the deeper the sound, the shorter it is, the higher pitch the sound. So if we're moving this away from the drone seat, it's making it longer, so it's going to get flatter. If we're moving it towards the drone seat, it's going to get shorter, so it's going to get sharper. So how we're going to adjust these to make sure that these are in the optimum spot on the tuning pin, because these are actually sound chambers, so it really does matter where they sit on the tuning pin. So if I move this in so that it goes that way, and this is how it would sit in the drone. If I move it in, the drone is also going to go that way, if that makes sense. If I turn it out or this way, then you're going to sit lower on the tuning pin. Okay, it's the same thing with the canaries. If I undo it and it goes that way, you're going to tune longer. If I put it in, it's going to tune shorter. Okay, so if we've got perfectly in-tune pipes, and they look like this. We're going to take this drone reed and we're going to move that tuning screw down so that we can move this down and still be at the same pitch. This one, we're going to move that tuning screw up so that we can move this up and retain the same pitch. Not that far. So this is going to make your pipes sound better and make them a lot easier to play, a lot easier to strike in, a lot easier to cut off. Now, here's the big catch is we did this for demonstration purposes, but you're actually going to have to make sure that your pipes are warmed up and tuned, that you're playing with a broken in reed, so to speak, before you make those fine tuning adjustments to make sure everything matches your chanter. The other thing is you're going to have to go through this process again when you get a new reed. Because like you saw with the blowing pressure, when he blew really hard, eventually it cut off. Now, if you're going from an easy reed to a hard reed, your drones might cut off a lot earlier than you want them to, if that makes sense. So we're just going to have to revisit over and over again. It's a lot of work, but it's well worth it.
Just one more thing I'd like to bring up and emphasize is that when you're adjusting your bridle up or down, don't do what I did one time while I'm moving this down. I was pushing the side of the tongue over without realizing it. And when I got done moving the bridle, the tongue was now angled. It wasn't straight down, and it uncovers part of your reed underneath and it will not sound. So make sure that that part is perfectly straight up and down when you are adjusting your bridle.
Now, another important thing to note with the tuning screw is that moving the screw in towards the seat is also going to make the reed a little bit louder, give it kind of a bolder sound along with sharpening it, and moving the plug away from the seat along with flattening the reed is also going to make it a little bit quieter and give it kind of a smoother sound.
Pipes are stupid.